They burned her face to shame her. He found her in the dust, bleeding but unbroken. She thought he'd turn away like the rest. Instead, he knelt. "Now you're one of us." The blood had dried down her neck by the time they threw her out. Smoke still clung to her skin, and the stink of scorched flesh hadn't left her nostrils. Alma Briggs didn't scream, not anymore. She'd screamed when they held her down, when the brand seared her cheek, when the sheriff spat and said, "Now folks'll know what you are." But that was hours ago. Maybe days. Time had twisted somewhere between the fire and the cold. Now Alma just walked, if it could be called walking. One shoe gone, dress torn near to the waist, half blind from swelling. But she moved forward, always forward, because if she stopped she'd die, and that would have pleased them too much. They left her near the river fork where nothing grew and the rocks cut deep. The jail door had creaked shut behind her with finality, but it was the silence that followed that hit hardest. No one in town had looked her way, not once. She wasn't a person anymore, just a cautionary tale in soot and blood. Alma's face was a mask of pain, one side bubbled and raw. She hadn't seen it, didn't need to. She'd felt every inch of it being carved in heat. By dusk her legs gave out. She hit the ground like a rag doll, her chin slamming stone. Distant howls carried over the hills, but she didn't flinch. Let them come, she thought. Wolves had more mercy than men. But it wasn't a wolf that found her. It was a man on horseback, followed by 3 children wrapped tight in buffalo hides. The oldest, a girl maybe 12, spotted Alma first and made a sound between a gasp and a cry. The man reined in hard, dismounted, and approached with quiet steps. His name was Rook, though Alma wouldn't know that until much later. Lakota. Scarred across his chest in a pattern that meant something sacred. He knelt beside her and didn't speak for a long while. When he finally did, his voice was rough but not cruel. "They do that to punish liars or whores or witches. They ever say which one you were?" Alma didn't answer, couldn't. Her mouth was thick with dried blood and silence. Rook studied her face. "Doesn't matter, they'll call it justice. Men always do." He rose and turned to the children. "Bring water." The middle child, a boy of about 9, sprinted forward with a small leather pouch. Rook dribbled it gently over Alma's lips and brow. She flinched at the touch but didn't pull away. He waited until her breathing steadied before he said the words that shifted something in her gut. "You're one of us now." He lifted her like she weighed nothing, settling her across the back of his horse. The youngest, a toddler barely able to walk, reached out as if to touch Alma's hand, then thought better of it and hugged her sister's leg instead. They rode into the hills long after night fell, the wind cold and sharp. Alma faded in and out of dark dreams. Fire, laughter, her father turning his back, Sheriff Clay's boots on the porch, that girl Ruthie whispering lies in the churchyard, all of it wrapped in heat and betrayal. When she woke again, it was to smoke, but the good kind, hearth smoke, food smoke, and the low hum of voices speaking in Lakota, smooth and melodic. Alma's eyes cracked open. She lay on thick hides inside a tipi, dimly lit by the coals of a dying fire. Outside, snow had begun to fall, slow and silent. She tried to sit up and failed. The pain in her face roared back to life. A woman appeared at her side without a word, pressing a damp cloth to her cheek. It stung worse than the burn, but Alma didn't cry out. The woman gave a single nod, approval maybe, and disappeared again. Rook entered a moment later. He didn't sit, just looked down at her like a man seeing a ghost that didn't scare him. "You'll live," he said. "Don't know if that's what you want, but it's what's happening." Alma tried to speak. Nothing came. "Don't need to talk yet," he said. "Just listen." So she did, as he explained that this wasn't his home, not really. That the land belonged to his dead wife's people, and he stayed because her spirit had nowhere else to go. That the children weren't all his by blood, but they were his by choice, and that meant more. That out here, no one asked what you'd done, only whether you meant to keep surviving. Then, gently, "They hurt you bad, but it won't kill you unless you let it." Alma closed her eyes. Let the warmth and the ache wash over her. In the days that followed, she learned their names. The oldest was Mina, sharp-eyed and stubborn. The boy was Tully, loud when he trusted you and silent when he didn't. The baby was Nessa. No one knew who her mother was, only that Rook had carried her back one winter and refused to say more. Alma didn't speak for nearly a week. She listened, watched, slept when she could. Her dreams stayed red and violent. She often woke gripping the hides like they might run from her. Mina was the first to treat her like more than broken glass. One morning, she shoved a bundle of herbs into Alma's hands and said, "Rook says you ain't useless. Prove it." Alma stared. Mina rolled her eyes. "You got hands, don't you? We need more poultice for Nessa's cough." It wasn't kindness, it was necessity, but it was enough. By the end of that day, Alma had spoken her first word since the branding. Done, just that, when she handed the poultice over. Rook heard about it and said nothing, but that night he set a fourth bowl by the fire. They never asked her past. She never offered, but the scars on her face spoke loud, and in time the children stopped flinching when she turned toward them. Still, fear had a way of bleeding back in. It came one night when riders passed too close to the hills. White men, laughing. One fired a shot into the air. Rook tensed, his hand on his blade. The children froze. Alma did too, but not in fear. In fury. She stepped from the tipi without thinking, firelight catching the shine of her scarred cheek. One of the riders saw her in the distance and jeered. "Hell, she's still alive," before galloping off. The next morning, Alma asked Rook how to throw a knife. He didn't ask why, just showed her. Later, while teaching Tully to mend traps, he said, "Pain's got two faces. One that eats you, one that feeds you. You gotta pick which one you let sit at your fire." Alma chose. And from that day, she stopped hiding her face. Word of her survival traveled slow, but not slow enough. A peddler from the east passed through the canyon trail 2 weeks after Alma first stood upright without falling. He brought flour, salt, and rumors. The children huddled nearby as he bartered with Rook, eyes flicking now and then to Alma's face, but saying nothing of it until his horse was packed to leave. Then came the words Alma had been waiting for since the brand cooled on her skin. "They say the witch still walks," he said, tugging his reins. "Say she cursed Clay's firstborn just by looking at him through the cell bars. Boy went sick not a day later." Rook didn't blink, just crossed his arms. The peddler laughed, nervous. "Don't know if it's true, but folks are spooked. That kind of talk spreads fast." Rook's eyes drifted to Alma, who stood by the fire, hands still wrapped in a linen strip from the last time she slipped while sharpening blades. Her gaze didn't falter. "She's no witch," Rook said flatly, "just a woman who survived." The peddler said nothing more, but Alma knew the cost of whispers. She'd grown up with the wrong last name in a town that preferred tidy women and tidy truths, and now that she bore something they couldn't clean off, they'd do worse than whisper. Later that night, Alma asked him, "Do you believe in curses?" Rook didn't answer right away. He carved his pipe slowly, the blade moving in clean motions. When he finally spoke, it was quiet. "I believe people will call a woman cursed if she won't die the way they want her to." The words hit harder than she expected. The snow began to melt by the 3rd week of March. Tully came running in one morning shouting about deer prints near the North Ridge, and Rook sent him and Mina to track while Alma stayed behind with Nessa. The baby was teething, loud, irritable, red-faced, and Alma tried everything from cooled stones to birchroot tea to soothe her. When Rook returned alone, dusk bleeding into the hills behind him, his shoulders were too tense, his eyes too sharp. Alma didn't ask, just put Nessa on her hip and followed him into the dark. They found Mina first, bruised but fighting. She swung a rock at a man nearly twice her size, screaming until her throat cracked. He'd already hit her once. Blood trailed down her temple. When Alma lunged forward, he turned, startled, his hand going to his belt. She didn't hesitate. Her knife moved like she'd been born with it in her hand. It sank into the meat of his shoulder, not enough to kill, but enough to make him scream. Rook appeared behind her, swift and silent, and finished it. Tully stumbled out moments later from the brush, wide-eyed and shaking. "They followed us," he choked. "Said they were just hunting, but they knew about her." He meant Alma. The next morning they buried one of the men. The other had fled into the trees, bleeding and cursing. Rook didn't give chase. Not yet. Mina didn't speak for a day and a half. Then she looked at Alma, at the scar, and said, "They hate you because you didn't die." Alma nodded. "They hate us too," Mina added, quieter. Alma reached across the fire and took the girl's hand. "Then we make them hate us honest." They moved camps the next day, deeper into the trees, past the old mining stretch where the ground caved in strange and sudden. Rook knew the land better than most, knew how to vanish without a trail. Alma followed, carried Nessa, held Mina close at night when dreams made her flinch, watched Tully climb trees like he was part squirrel. And for the first time since the pain, Alma let herself laugh. It happened by accident. A deer startled Tully, who fell face first into a snowdrift and emerged sputtering curses he wasn't supposed to know. Mina threw a pinecone at his head. Alma snorted. Rook just raised one eyebrow. The sound of her own laughter startled her. "You've got a good laugh," he said later that evening, voice low. "Hard-earned, like most things worth keeping." Alma didn't reply, but that night she dreamed of nothing at all, a blank slate instead of fire. 3 days later, the man who fled returned. Not in body, but in sign. Rook found a mark carved into a tree near the western edge of the new camp, a cross surrounded by a circle, white men's way of saying claimed land. Alma stared at it a long time. "He's bringing others." "Not yet," Rook said. "This is a warning, not a war party." "But it will be." He nodded, "Eventually." Alma traced the scar on her cheek with one finger. "Then we don't wait." That night while the children slept, Alma pulled out the dress she hadn't worn since the branding. She tore it into strips and tied them around her boots, her arms, her knife sheath. Not for show, but as armor, as memory. She braided her hair back, tight and simple, faced the mirror for the first time in weeks. Her left side was smooth, plain, her right, red, uneven, puckered, but her eyes, they were sharp again. "You look like someone," Rook said from the tippy entrance. "I am." They waited 6 days, then the wind changed. Smoke rose on the southern horizon, not from a campfire, but a signal. Alma stood with her knife in hand, watching the sky shift color. "They're calling others," Rook said. "Not many, but more than we've got." "Good," Alma said. "Let them come." Rook looked at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Most folks would run." "I've done enough running." He paused. "You're not like most." "I wasn't even before the burn. They just needed a reason." When the riders came, they didn't find a camp. They found nothing. No fire, no hides, no footprints. Only snow and silence. And a message carved into the bark of a cedar tree: "We don't run." It wasn't long before nerves set in. Men began to argue among themselves. The cold gnawed at them. One by one they peeled off, claiming they'd return with more. They didn't. Only one man stayed near the tree for more than a day. He waited. Until Alma came to him. Alone. She stepped into the clearing like a ghost from their stories. Scarred, hooded, blade at her side. The man reached for his pistol but never drew it. Not when her eyes didn't flinch. Not when she said, "Tell Clay, tell him I remember everything." Then she vanished again. Not into the trees. Into the legend. That night Tully crept to Alma's side. "Were you scared?" She considered. "Yes, and I did it anyway." He nodded solemnly, then whispered, "I think I want a scar too." Alma laughed, pulled him close. No, baby, you want a story. A scar's just proof you paid too much for it. Tully seemed to think on that, and the silence that followed was deep, unshaken. Until the cry split the night. It came from Mina's tipi. A sound Alma hadn't heard in years. A scream born of blood. Alma was moving before her eyes had fully opened, the blade already gripped in her hand. The scream still echoed through the trees, sharp and raw, and somewhere behind it, Mina's voice, strangled and desperate. Alma shoved open the tipi flap and sprinted barefoot across frozen ground, heart thundering in her chest. She reached Mina's tent in time to see the blood soaking through the girl's bedding and the wild terror in her eyes as she pressed both hands to her thigh. She's been cut. Rook's voice came low and firm from just behind Alma, who had dropped to her knees beside the girl. Not deep, but she didn't wake up fast enough. Someone was here, Alma rasped, already tugging at the furs, searching the girl's leg for the source. A long, shallow slice just below the knee bled freely, but it missed the artery. Not meant to kill, meant to mark, to scare. Mina nodded, teeth clenched. He smelled like pine and whiskey. I woke when he touched my ankle. Alma pressed harder against the wound, locking eyes with Rook. Too quiet, he muttered. I was watching west. Tully, Alma's voice cracked. Nessa. Safe, still sleeping. Rook turned and disappeared into the trees before she could speak again. Alma stayed with Mina, holding pressure until the bleeding stopped, wrapping the wound with clean strips. The girl didn't cry, didn't whimper. She stared straight ahead with a fury Alma recognized in herself. When Rook returned, his hands were empty, but his jaw was set like stone. Tracks go southeast. He was alone. He'll come back, Alma said, smoothing Mina's hair off her forehead. They always come back when they think no one's watching. That morning the camp didn't rest. Tully was tasked with gathering wood, eyes sharp and flitting with every step. Alma kept Nessa tied close to her chest, her small body warm and silent. Rook moved through the trees like a shadow, checking for signs, planting decoys, shifting brush to hide scent. But it was Mina who changed the most. She wouldn't sit, refused to stay still. She tried to walk on her bandaged leg, wincing but determined. They want me afraid, she told Alma when scolded, so I won't be. Alma didn't argue. Instead, she began showing the girl how to tie blades beneath the folds of her clothes, how to stay silent in snow, how to disappear in daylight. Mina soaked it in with the hunger of someone who had something to prove. That night Alma sat near the fire, her fingers moving slow over the leather strip in her hands. Rook sat across from her, sharpening a long-handled blade. Tully was asleep, curled tight like a pup beside Nessa. Mina sat against the tipi wall, eyes wide open, still and waiting. I know who he was, Rook said after a while. Alma didn't answer. He was with Clay's crew last winter. Drifter, called himself Finch, kept quiet but cruel. How far behind him do you think Clay is? Depends how long he's been tracking. Alma looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. Then we have time to choose. Rook's eyes flicked up. Choose what? She met his gaze. Whether we're just surviving or finally ready to fight. The question hung there, suspended in firelight and cold. In the days that followed, they prepared, not with grand declarations or drawn battle lines, but with quiet intention. Rook taught Alma how to snare rabbits using bones and bent wood. Alma taught Mina how to move without sound. Tully learned to keep watch, not from fear, but from pride. Even Nessa seemed to cry less, watching the older ones with solemn eyes. But every hour felt like borrowed time. One morning Alma woke to the sound of distant hooves, not close, but coming. Rook stood on the rise just above camp, watching the horizon. 2 riders, he said, moving slow, watching their flanks Clay's style. Alma joined him, teeth clenched. Then we stop hiding. They didn't run. Instead, they waited, not in fear, but in stillness. By the second morning, 4 riders camped near the ravine. By the third, a 5th arrived, the one who'd marked Mina, Finch. Alma didn't need to be close to recognize the shape of him, the way he moved, the way his gaze always lingered too long and his hands never rested. She stood at the edge of the ridge with her knife in her fire, and for a long time watched. "What now?" Mina asked, stepping beside her. Alma didn't look away. "We make them doubt." And they did. It began with voices in the night, soft, just beyond the fire's edge. Then trampled prints circling the riders' tents. Then a wolf's skull, hung from a tree with a strip of cloth from Mina's torn bedding. Psychological warfare, subtle and constant. By the 5th night, 1 rider left. The 6th night, another followed. Only Finch remained by the 7th, waiting stubborn and alone, staring into the trees like they might bleed the truth. That was when Alma moved. She walked into his camp just after dusk, alone, her hair braided tight and her scar gleaming in the firelight. Finch stood too fast, reached for his belt, but Alma didn't flinch. "You," he spat, "you're dead, they said you." "They said a lot of things." She walked closer. "You marked a child," she said. "I warned Clay, you didn't listen." "Just wanted to remind folks what side they were on," he said, spitting into the dirt. "Can't let a branded witch go walking around like she's got rights." Alma smiled, not warm, not cruel, just tired. "That brand, it burned away the part of me that ever gave a damn what men like you think." He lunged. She was ready. The blade met bone. Not fatal, not yet. He screamed, and the trees around them answered. Rook stepped from the shadows, so did Mina. Tully appeared next, carrying a length of cord, face hard and steady. Finch dropped to his knees, blood pooling at his side. "No," he gasped. "No, please." "You marked her," Alma said, nodding toward Mina. "We're giving her the right to mark back." The girl stepped forward. Finch begged. Mina didn't speak. She knelt. She raised the blade. And she made 1 clean mark down his cheek, not deep, not cruel, just enough. Just enough for the world to know. When it was done, Rook tied him to a branch and whispered, "You tell Clay this, the one he tried to burn. She lit her own fire." They left him there, bleeding and silent. They didn't return to the same camp. They moved north beyond the river fork where the hills turned green early and the night softened. Spring was coming. Alma felt it in her bones. Not warmth, but change. That evening Tully asked, "Are we safe now?" Rook looked to Alma. "No," she answered, "but we're ready." The river had thawed by the time the first letter came. It wasn't carried by rider or courier, just left, wedged between 2 stones at the edge of the creek where Tully often fished. Mina found it. She said the paper smelled like kerosene and blood. Alma unfolded it slowly, squatting near the water, the children huddled close behind her. The message was short, the handwriting careful but smirking in its precision. "You're not hidden, you're not safe, you're still marked, and I am still coming." There was no name. There didn't need to be. She could hear Clay's voice in the silence between the lines. Rook said nothing at first. He took the letter from her hand and fed it to the fire without ceremony. The flame caught fast, curling black around each word until nothing remained but ash. Alma didn't blink. Neither did Mina. "What now?" Tully asked, voice thin. "We live," Alma said, "same as always." But nothing felt the same. That night the trees seemed too still, the wind too quiet. Nessa cried until her throat gave out, as if she felt the shift before the rest of them. Alma stayed awake long past midnight, staring into the darkness outside the tippy flap, the knife beside her hand and her body tense as a bowstring. She didn't expect to sleep, and she didn't. But she did dream. In the dream, she was back in Clay's jail, the cot beneath her splintered and thin, the door creaking as someone approached. But instead of the sheriff, it was herself who entered, scarred and unbent. The two Almas stared at each other, neither flinching, until the scarred one knelt and said, "You know who you are now." She woke just before dawn. Rook was already outside, pacing the eastern ridge, eyes locked on the horizon. When she approached, he said only, "There's movement. 4 riders, maybe 5. Scouts. Maybe just loud ghosts." Alma glanced back at the camp, where Mina was feeding Nessa boiled oats and Tully was checking the traps. Everything ordinary, everything borrowed. "We need to stop waiting," she said. "You want to run?" "No," her voice sharpened. "I want to decide what happens next." Rook looked at her then, not past her, not through, at her. "And what do you see?" She didn't pause. "I see a woman who survived, and a man who helps others do the same. I see 3 children who didn't ask for this life but are making it anyway. And I see a man like Clay who thinks fire and shame are enough to bury us. Then we show him we don't burn easy." The plan began small. They sent Tully west with a broken trap and a half-story about wolves returning to the valley. The boy delivered it to a trader Rook trusted. By the time that story reached the nearest outpost, it would be Clay's ears that burned. Then they moved. Not far, but enough. They crossed the river, circled east, set up decoys at old campsites. They left tracks that pointed the wrong way, broke branches deliberately, scattered signs. Alma marked trees with hidden signs, code she taught only Mina, who took to it like it was a secret language written just for her. Then they waited again. But this time with purpose. And when Clay's men came, they walked right into the lie. It took less than a day for the traps to spring. The first was simple, a pitfall near the old logging trail. One rider vanished before he even knew he'd stepped wrong. The others dismounted, wary. That's when Alma moved. She stepped from the trees with fire in her eyes and steel in her hands. Rook followed close, bow drawn, silent and deadly. The riders froze. Alma lifted her chin, letting the light catch her scar. "You're looking for a victim," she said, "but you found something else." One man, the youngest, turned and ran. Rook let him go. The other 2 dropped their weapons. By nightfall, they were gone. Rook and Alma stood over the abandoned trail, listening to the wind. "You're good at this," he said finally. "At surviving?" she asked. "At turning fear into direction." Alma didn't answer, just walked past him toward camp. That night they didn't post a watch, not because they felt safe, but because they knew they'd bought time, and time in a world like this was the rarest currency. The next few days passed quietly. Alma taught Mina how to snare birds without breaking bones. Rook fixed the saddle strap Tully kept fraying. Nessa learned to say no with her whole chest and stomped whenever Alma tried to clean her face. It felt close to peace. But peace, like time, always runs out. On the 7th day, a shadow returned. Not a man. A memory. A woman arrived at the edge of camp, hat low, scarf higher, her horse limping from an old wound. Alma saw her first. She had one hand near her blade before the rider even dismounted. "Easy," the woman said, lifting both hands. "Name's Eliza Kett. I knew your father." Alma stiffened. "My father's dead." "I didn't say he was." They stared at each other for a long moment. Rook appeared behind Alma. His posture didn't change, but the threat in his eyes was unmistakable. Eliza removed her hat. Her face was lined, weathered, honest. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "I'm here because word's spreading. They say there's a woman with a scar like hell's own kiss, living in the wild with a Lakota ghost and 3 stolen kids. They say she's building something." "Let them talk," Alma said flatly. "I'm not just talk. Eliza pulled something from her saddlebag, a locket, tarnished, familiar. Alma's heart dropped. That was my mother's. She gave it to me to keep safe before she passed. Told me, if you ever find Alma, you tell her she wasn't born to be small. Rook looked at Alma. She took the locket with shaking hands. Inside was a tiny sketch. Her mother's eyes, her own hair, a note behind it in faded ink. Don't let them bury your fire. Alma didn't cry. She clenched her jaw. Why now, she asked. Because Clay's not just after you anymore, Eliza said. He's after what you represent. You made them afraid, and men like him only know how to fight fear with more fire. So let him burn, Alma said quietly. I've already been through the worst. No, Eliza said gently. You haven't, but you might be ready now. That night, Alma didn't sleep. She sat beside Rook, the locket heavy in her hand. She's right, she said. This isn't just about survival anymore. No, Rook agreed. It's about claiming something. For me, for Mina, for all of us. He looked over at her. Then what do we do? Alma stood. We stop running, we stop hiding, we make a stand. Rook rose too. Where? She stared into the fire. Her scar caught the light. Bitter Hollow, she said. The name landed hard. Rook's brows lifted. That's where they branded you. That's where I stopped being theirs. Rook nodded slowly. Then it's time they see who you've become. Alma turned to the children, watching from the shadows, listening, always listening. You ready? She asked them. Tully grinned, fists clenched. Mina stood tall. Nessa babbled something that sounded close to yes. Rook touched her shoulder. I'm with you. Alma nodded. Then she whispered the words that would shape everything that came next. Let's go home. They reached Bitter Hollow just after dawn on the 5th day of travel. It sat smaller than Alma remembered, which both comforted and disturbed her. The town had always loomed large in her mind, because of the brand, because of what she left behind. Now it looked like a hollowed shell, its storefronts slumped inward, its dirt roads scarred by wagon ruts and hoof prints, and too many years of being walked on by the wrong kind of men. Alma dismounted first. Her boots struck the dust in silence. Rook followed, then the children, each one quiet but alert, their eyes scanning every porch, every alley, every flicker of curtain behind cracked windows. Eliza had parted ways with them at the pass, promising to circle south and return only if she saw signs of Clay's riders. But before she left, she pressed something into Alma's hand, a small piece of iron shaped like a sunburst. What's this? Alma had asked. Your mother's, Eliza said. Wore it when she came west, said she wasn't afraid of being seen. Alma had kept it close ever since, hidden beneath her coat. Now, standing in the same square where she'd once been dragged by her wrists past the sheriff's office, past Clay, Alma gripped it so tight the points pressed marks into her palm. Mina stepped beside her. You okay? Alma didn't answer the question, just kept walking. The saloon was the only place open. A soft clink of glasses inside, slow piano music from a hand that wasn't trying very hard. A few heads turned when she stepped through the swinging doors. Most stared a beat too long before looking away, pretending they didn't recognize her. But the barkeep, an older man with more wrinkles than hair, froze mid-pour. You. Alma nodded. Me. The room went still. I heard you were dead. You heard wrong. He swallowed. You here to start something. I'm here to finish it. The man behind her, Rook, didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was like a shadow pulled tight across the doorway, unspoken but unmistakable. No one moved. I'm looking for Clay, Alma said. He still ride for this town. The barkeep's lips tightened. He runs it. Of course he did. Alma turned, her voice louder now. Tell your sheriff the woman he tried to burn is back, and I'm not alone. She left the saloon without waiting for a reply. By midday, word had spread. They were watched from every window, every stoop, but no one came forward. It wasn't until just before sunset that a rider appeared on the horizon, tall, lean, familiar. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Clay dismounted outside the general store, his boot heels ringing against the boards. His coat was darker than she remembered. His eyes were the same, cold, amused, arrogant. He stood there looking at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You don't look half bad for a ghost," he said. "You don't look any different," she replied. He smiled. "People said you'd been spotted out west, running wild, heard you picked up some strays." Alma felt the children behind her. Rook stood off to her right, arms crossed, silent. "I didn't come here to make small talk," she said. "You marked me, you tried to kill me, and you're still chasing me." "Should have stayed dead," Clay said. "Would have saved us both the trouble." Alma stepped forward. "You branded me because I spoke your name after what you did to those girls. You called it punishment. I call it proof." Clay's smile faded. "I survived your fire," Alma said. "Now I'm here to return the favor." Clay moved like a snake, hand to his belt, but Alma was faster. Her knife was out before his gun cleared the holster, and Rook had already drawn his bow. The arrow aimed not at Clay, but at the deputy who'd stepped out behind the livery, rifle half raised. "I wouldn't," Rook said calmly. Clay's hand froze. "We ain't here for a bloodbath," Alma said, "but we won't run." "You think these people are gonna help you?" Clay growled. "They watched you burn once, they'll watch again." "Maybe," Alma said, "but this time I'm not the only one on fire." That night they camped on the edge of town. No one invited them in. No one asked them to leave. It was a strange standoff, quiet, cold, but taut with potential. Alma sat near the fire, the locket around her neck, the iron sunburst in her palm. "You sure about this?" Rook asked. "I was never sure before," she said. "I'm sure now." The next morning, things shifted. A woman from the boarding house brought them bread. Didn't say much, just dropped it on a rock near the fire and walked away. Then a boy brought water. Then someone left wool blankets near their horses. No one spoke openly, but the town was watching, measuring. On the third day, a girl, 16 maybe, approached Alma while she was tending to Nessa. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did he burn you for speaking up?" Alma looked at her. "Yes." The girl nodded. "Then I believe you." That was all. But it was enough. By sunset, 3 more women came, each quiet, each carrying their own story. One had a scar on her wrist. Another had a limp. The third just had eyes too old for her face. Alma listened. They weren't testimonies. They were offerings, truths laid bare in quiet resistance. Clay knew it too. His men started watching closer. Riders circled camp at night. Once a shot cracked the air, missed by a mile but loud enough to remind them. "We can't wait forever," Rook said on the 6th night. "He's baiting us, trying to wear us down." "Then we don't wait." Alma stood, brushed ash from her coat, and walked toward the church. It was empty. She lit every candle she could find, opened the doors wide, and sat on the front step. And waited. People came. First the girl. Then the old man from the saloon. Then the 3 women. Then more. By midnight, half the town stood in silence, faces pale and unsure, waiting for something they couldn't name. Alma stood. "You all saw what happened to me," she said. "Some of you helped, some of you looked away, some of you tried to forget." She pulled the scarf from her face. "This is what Clay left me, a scar meant to shut me up, but it didn't." The silence held. "I'm not here to ask for justice," Alma said. "I'm here to build something stronger than fear, and I'm not leaving." Someone clapped. One pair of hands. Then another. Then more. Clay rode in at dawn, 6 riders at his back. He dismounted in front of the church, gun drawn. "This ends now," he said. Alma stepped forward. "No," she said, "this begins now." Behind her the people stood. The girl, the old man, the women, the mothers, the boys with slingshots, the men with rusted rifles. Clay's eyes flicked across them. "You think they'll die for you?" he hissed. "They'll stand with me," she said. "That's more than you ever earned." The first shot came from one of Clay's men. Rook was faster. The rider dropped from his horse with an arrow in his thigh. Screams. But no retreat. The townspeople didn't scatter. They stepped forward. Clay saw it, saw the shift, saw what Alma had become. Not a witch. Not a warning. A reckoning. He backed away. Mounted. Spat at the ground. "This ain't over," he growled. "It is if you leave," Alma said. He stared at her a beat longer. Then turned. And rode. His men followed. The town stayed still until the dust settled. Then someone laughed. A deep, broken, joyful laugh. It was Alma. It was Mina. Then Tully joined. Then more. And suddenly the square was full of something Alma hadn't heard in a long, long time. Hope. It wasn't over, not truly. Not yet. Not just because Clay had ridden off and the town had found its voice. Alma knew better than to trust the stillness that came after a storm. The wind might rest, but the damage always lingered. And men like Clay Crowley didn't just disappear. They regrouped. They waited. They came back harder. But for now, something had shifted. Alma could feel it in the ground beneath her boots as she walked through Bitter Hollow with Mina beside her, shoulders squared like they finally belonged there. Windows that once shuttered when Alma passed now cracked open. Children peeked. Women offered nods. Even the men, though slower to show it, had begun to change the way they looked at her, not as the scarred woman who defied Clay, but as the one who might lead something better. Still, Alma didn't smile, not fully. She had learned that freedom bought on silence didn't last. You had to build on truth or not at all. They took up residence in an old stone cabin just past the edge of town, one that had sat abandoned since the last flood season. The roof sagged, and the chimney leaned like a drunk, but it had bones. Rook repaired the door that first afternoon. Tully and Mina hauled stones to patch the hearth. Nessa took to the place instantly, toddling across the floorboards like she'd claimed it for herself. Alma kept busy. Restlessness wasn't just a habit, it was a shield. She swept dust from every corner, restitched the blankets they'd carried with them, organized the few supplies they had. Every movement gave her time to think without thinking too hard. Rook noticed it before she did. "You're not waiting for peace," he said one night, watching her tend the fire like it owed her something. "You're waiting for the next fight." Alma paused. "Aren't you?" "I'm preparing," he said, "but I'm not expecting." "What's the difference?" He met her eyes, fear. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. The next morning, Alma found herself standing in the old sheriff's office. It smelled of mildew and old tobacco, but it was quiet, and that mattered. She ran her fingers across the wall where the branding irons had once hung. They were gone now, either taken when Clay fled or hidden by someone who wanted to forget what had been done there. She stood there a long time, until the door creaked open behind her. "Eliza." "You came back," Alma said. "Told you I would." Alma didn't turn. "He's not gone." "No," Eliza agreed, "but he's limping." Alma finally looked over her shoulder. "Eliza," she said, softer now, "why'd you help me back then? You didn't even know me." "I knew the way he looked at you. Same way he looked at my sister before she stopped coming home." Alma nodded. "People here," Eliza continued, "they've been scared so long they forgot how to want anything else. You gave them permission. I didn't ask to. Doesn't matter, you did. They stood in silence. Then Alma said, I need to know if he's gathering again. He is. Alma didn't flinch. How long do we have? 3 days, maybe 4. Then we use every minute. The preparations began immediately. Rook rallied the townsfolk, anyone willing to hold a weapon, run a message, or stitch bandages. Alma mapped out every entrance and exit point through the town, marked spots for watchers, and posted signal fires in case the riders returned at night. Even the children weren't idle. Tully and Mina fashioned warning bells from tin and string, hanging them along the fence lines and in the trees. Nessa, too small to help, took to standing by the window with her arms crossed, mimicking her mother's posture. On the second night, a man came to their door. Mid-30s, hat in hand, a nervous quiver in his voice. My name S. Everett Thorne, used to ride with Clay. Rook stepped in fast, hand near his blade, but Alma raised hers. I left before the branding, Everett said. Didn't sit right with me. I've been hiding ever since, but I heard what you did, what you stood for. I got a brother still with him, and I want him out. But if you need someone who knows their paths, their habits, hell, even their horses, I'm yours. Alma studied him. He looked like a man trying to erase his past with every word. Then sit, she said. Tell me what you know. They trained, not in formations or drills, but in quiet, determined skill. Rook taught the men how to track from sound alone. Alma worked with the women, showing them how to shoot while seated, how to move between buildings without being seen. Mina led the youngest, teaching them to carry water, find cover, and stay silent under pressure. Even Eliza had a role, disassembling old rifles, cleaning them until they clicked smooth, then reassembling them with hands that didn't shake. Alma watched it all, and something in her began to ache, not with fear, not with doubt, with the weight of being needed. She'd never been needed before, only survived. On the third night, Clay's scout was caught. A boy no older than Tully, thin as a reed and desperate when they dragged him into the square. I didn't mean to, he sobbed. He made me. Alma knelt before him. Did he brand you? She asked gently. The boy nodded. Where? He pointed to his ribs, lifted his shirt, a crude circle of iron fresh. We're not him, Alma said. She looked to the crowd. We don't repay fire with fire, we repay it with strength. The townspeople murmured their agreement. Rook led the boy to the chapel, gave him food and water. Later, Mina brought him a blanket. The boy wept. Alma sat alone that night. The locket was cool in her hands. She whispered into the fire, not a prayer exactly, but something close. Let them be stronger than I ever was. At dawn, Clay returned. He rode in slow. Not sneaking. Not charging. Just enough to be seen. There were 15 riders behind him. They wore rifles and pistols. Some wore scraps of uniforms from old wars, faded and fraying. One had a string of teeth around his neck. Clay stopped at the edge of the square. Alma stood waiting. You had your chance, he said. No, she said. You had yours. You used it to hurt people, to burn them, to mark girls like cattle. Clay sneered. I brought justice. You brought shame. You bring chaos. I bring truth. He raised his hand. Before he could drop it, a sound split the air. Not a gunshot. A bell. Then another. Then 15. The children's traps. Riders jerked around, startled, confused, uneasy. Clay's men weren't loyal, they were afraid, and fear cracks. Then the people of Bitter Hollow stepped forward. All of them. The girl with the scar on her wrist. The Boy Scout they'd spared. The old man from the saloon. Rook with his bow raised. Eliza, rifle in hand. Tully and Mina stood together, silent, unblinking. Alma raised her voice. Bitter Hollow is not yours. Clay's horse danced, sensing the tension. You can leave, she said, or you can fall. Clay's face twisted. Then he spat. And turned. Again. No charge. No violence. Not yet. But this time, he left with fewer men than he came with. 3 riders stayed behind. One dropped their weapon at Alma's feet. She didn't pick it up. She looked them in the eye and nodded. You're safe now. The sun dipped low. Campfires flickered on every street. A quiet celebration, not of victory, but of survival. Rook found Alma near the edge of town, looking toward the hills. He'll come again, she said. Maybe. But next time he won't find just me. He'll find all of us. Rook nodded. And if he does, then we'll have built something stronger than fear. She looked toward the future then, not with dread, not with hesitation, but with fire. Because now she didn't walk alone. Now she led. And for the first time in her life, Alma didn't just belong somewhere. She was the place. It started again with smoke. Not fire, at least not at first, but the smell of it. Wood and oil and something older beneath it, like scorched leather or bone. Alma woke before the sun, eyes opening to darkness, heart already pounding. She didn't know why, not yet, just that something was wrong. Then she smelled it. She bolted upright. Outside, the air held a stillness too deep for dawn. Even the birds were silent. Nessa stirred in her blanket beside her, and Mina sat up slowly, eyes wide, lips already parting for a question she didn't get to ask. Alma whispered, "Wake Tully, get Rook." She didn't wait for a response, just stood, pulled on her boots and stepped outside. The sky was still dark, but the eastern ridge pulsed orange. Not sunrise. Flames. She broke into a run. Rook met her at the halfway point, bow in hand, jaw set. They hit the chapel, he said, not out of breath. Casualties. He shook his head. Empty. They waited until it was clear. This is a message. Alma didn't slow. Then we answer. By the time they reached the hill, others were already there. Eliza, Everett, the old man from the saloon, a few of the women who'd stood by her in the square. The chapel was gutted. Its roof had caved inward, the bell tower reduced to a blackened tooth. Embers glowed in the grass. Smoke curled into the trees. No sign of Clay, no riders, just the ruin left behind. Why the chapel? Mina asked quietly, stepping beside her mother. Because it was ours, Alma said. Because it meant something. The girl nodded. No tears. No panic. Just quiet anger. And Alma realized in that moment that the fear Clay had once thrived on was truly dying here. Not because of her alone, but because of them. All of them. Standing, breathing, choosing not to run. Eliza walked the perimeter, eyes scanning the shadows. They didn't want to fight tonight, she said. They wanted us scared, wanted to remind us they're still out there. Alma clenched her fists. Then we stopped waiting for them. Eliza raised a brow. You got something in mind? Yes, Alma said, but we don't do it from here. Rook turned to her. Then where? Alma looked back at the smoldering chapel. And she said, we go to the gulch. They left at first light. Not everyone. The children stayed behind with Everett and a handful of townsfolk, posted in the safest building they could find, reinforced walls, 2 exit points, full view of the square. Alma kissed Nessa's forehead before she left. Mina didn't cry. She just handed Alma a small slingshot she'd made from twine and a bent spoon. Just in case, she said. Tully gave Rook a nod so serious it seemed to age him 10 years. I'll hold the line. Alma's heart cracked. But she didn't show it. She led a group of 12 toward the ridge, Eliza, Rook, and 10 others armed with what they had, old rifles, bows, axes. They moved fast and silent, sticking to the tree line, skirting the dry creek bed until the valley opened below them like a wound. Clay's camp lay nestled at the base of the gulch, smoke curling from their fires, horses tethered along the edge, men moving like shadows. Too many to take head-on. But Alma didn't want a war. She wanted the end. She crouched behind a boulder, eyes scanning. Eliza. The older woman shifted beside her. They're spread thin, 2 guarding the horses, 1 up by the rocks. Rest are sleeping or gambling near the fire. Any sign of Clay? Eliza hesitated. There, she pointed, the tent with the blue stripe. Rook leaned in. We wait till nightfall. No, Alma said, we go now, while the sun's in their eyes. They moved fast. Rook and 2 others peeled off toward the horses, cutting bridles and scattering salt to spook them. Eliza led the flank around the eastern edge. Alma went straight through the center with 3 at her back, moving low between the scrub and shale, heart hammering not from fear, but from clarity. Clay had to see her coming. He needed to. The fire crackled ahead, laughter drifted, cards slapped on wood. Then the horses screamed. All hell broke loose. Alma lunged for the tent as riders scrambled for saddles, some half-dressed, some dragging rifles. Rook's arrows flew silent and sure. Eliza fired once, hitting a man through the thigh. Another fell screaming into the fire. Alma didn't stop. She reached the tent flap and tore it aside. Clay was inside. Alone. Fully dressed, waiting. She froze. You knew, she breathed. He smiled. You think I didn't know you'd come for me? He was holding something, not a gun, a satchel. You set the fire, she said. He nodded. Burning's the only thing that gets people's attention. Then I'll make sure they never forget you, she hissed. She lunged. He moved quicker than she expected. Threw the satchel, gunpowder from the weight of it, toward the fire pit in the center of camp. Flames flared. Alma tackled him before he could light the fuse. They hit the ground hard, his elbow smashing into her ribs, her knife flashing toward his throat. He caught her wrist, slammed her back into the dirt, and snarled, You always were too loud for your own good. She shoved her knee into his side. He grunted, lost his grip, and she rolled, blade catching the light. Then, gunfire. From behind. Alma ducked as a rider fired toward the tent. Clay screamed. Alma looked down. Blood. Not hers. His leg torn open. He gurgled something, eyes wide with shock. Eliza appeared in the flap. Come on. Alma didn't move. Not right away. She stared at Clay, bleeding, gasping, face finally stripped of pride. I didn't survive for this, she said. Then she stood. And left him there. They rode back by nightfall. No one pursued them. They didn't burn the camp. Didn't torch the bodies. They just left. Because they didn't need proof. They had presence. And presence was more powerful than fire. The town met them with silence first. Then cheers. Then tears. Alma dismounted slowly. The first thing she saw was Nessa, arms wide, running. She caught the child mid-stride and buried her face in her hair. Mina was next, clinging to her waist, sobbing and laughing at once. Tully stood at the edge of the crowd, tears in his eyes, fists clenched. You kept us safe, he said. You did that yourselves, Alma replied. They slept that night with doors unlocked. Not because danger was gone, but because the fear was. Alma woke before the sun. She stood outside the stone cabin, the air crisp, the sky still ink blue. Rook joined her. You did it, he said. No, she said, we did. He nodded, then asked what now. Alma stared out over the valley, over Bitter Hollow, still quiet, still healing. Now we build, she said. For the ones who couldn't, he said. For the ones still coming, she added. She reached into her coat and pulled out the sunburst Eliza had given her. She held it to the sky, letting the first rays of morning catch on the iron. Let them come, she whispered, let them see. And they would. Because Alma wasn't just a name anymore. She was a fire they couldn't put out. They buried him quietly. No gallows, no fire, just a grave marked by stone and the silence of a town that refused to carry his name any longer. Clay Crowley died in the gulch, wounded, freezing, mumbling about a woman with a burned face who walked through fire and didn't flinch. Alma didn't go to the grave. She didn't need to. The dead didn't scare her anymore. Instead, she helped lay the foundation for the new chapel with her bare hands. Eliza ran the store. Jonah taught Mina how to carve. Rook and Tully built fences. Nessa learned how to laugh again. Bitter Hollow didn't forget what it had been, but it decided what it would become. Alma stood at the center of that becoming. She didn't ask for thanks, but people brought her small things anyway. A warm coat, a carved bird, a cup of sweet tea left on her porch each morning. She didn't ask for loyalty, but she got it because she never lied, because she stayed. One afternoon, a writer came. He was young, bruised, skittish. I was with Clay, he said, hat in hand. Long time ago I left. My sister never made it out. Alma didn't judge him. What's her name? Sadie. We'll keep a place for her. He stayed quietly, helped Rook patch the stable roof, slept near the orchard, watched the road. Alma sat beneath the oak, sun on her face. Nessa climbed up beside her. Why'd they do it to your face? She asked softly. Alma didn't flinch, to make me feel small. Did it work? Alma turned, smiled slow, not even close. And across Bitter Hollow, on windows, doors, benches, they carved the same thing over and over. A sunburst. Not just for Alma, but for every woman who'd been burned, beaten, or broken and still chose to rise. Because in this town, scars didn't end stories. They started them.